Welcome to the Embracing Race podcast. All episodes were recorded in advance, so don't be alarmed if the timeline seems a little bit cattywampus. Content warning. In this episode, we discuss topics related to violence against women and the trans and non-binary community, as well as the policing of menstrual health. We understand that these topics can be sensitive or triggering for those who have experienced violence or have experienced body dysphoria. Please know that if this topic is something you feel will cause more harm than help, we understand and encourage you to wait to tune back in next week. We respect and value who you are and the experiences you've had. Do what is right and healthy for you.
This is Embracing Race, Conversations with Truth and Intention. We are so excited to have Pavita Singh on. Pavita, I met Pavita through the publishing company that we both have published with and work for. I no longer work with them, but I'm like PYG family adjacent. Pavita, everybody always says that I got 20 million jobs. Pavita has 30 million jobs and going. and I just want to just highlight the fact that you're at Columbia, right? Getting her doctorate. And
No big thing.
Right. And in between all of that, started a nonprofit. And when you were talking about the nonprofit a couple of weeks ago, I was, number one, mad at myself that I didn't really know that was what the nonprofit was about. And number two, I'm like, you totally have to come on to the show to talk about it. I mean, and to get more exposure, and I don't know. And so let me just back up. So on the Facebook page, it says it was started in DC, and I'm in DC, and I didn't even know about this. I feel real ignorant. I'm just gonna say it. I'm just like right out the gate. Like I feel like I should have known this much sooner in life. But when you know better, you do better, as Auntie Maya said. So can you talk about a little bit about yourself and Girls Health Ed? Like, what's it all about?
Sure. So a little bit about myself. My name is Pavita. My mission is to spread light, love, learning, and laughter, and leave a little bit of my sparkle wherever I go. And I try to make the world a little bit better and have fun doing it. And Shani, as you know, we have lots of fun doing what we do.
Yeah.
So in terms of my work, Shani very graciously mentioned a little bit about my background. So I am pursuing my doctorate in health and behavior studies at Columbia. I am also the award-winning best-selling author of To All the Magic in Me, a poetry book about mental health and emotions and self-care. And I am very excited that my second poetry book, which covers some more broad themes of women's empowerment, solo travel as a woman, sexual empowerment, mental health, and the like, is going to be coming out this year as well, hopefully in the next few months.
Sexual empowerment.
Oh, yeah.
Well, okay, let's just start with the girls.
Yeah. So Girls Health Ed is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to advance gender equality by fostering healthy, informed, and empowered decision-making in adolescent girls and young women, particularly focused on those in low-income, underserved communities where they're unlikely to get the type of information and programs that we offer either at home or at school. And so the way that we go about achieving this is by providing medically accurate, gender transformative, intersectional, comprehensive health and sexuality education in schools and community centers. So we're active both in the US and in Kenya. And within the US, we're active in New York, DC, LA, New Orleans, and Miami. And the way that our delivery model works is that we have trained teaching fellows who are volunteers recruited directly from the communities in which we serve. And these are young women who are typically college students, graduate students, or young professionals who are pursuing something related to the work that we're doing and who are, of course, passionate about the mission. And then we train them in-house in our in-house developed curriculum to then go into schools and community centers and deliver our workshops on the ground. So As I mentioned, we have a very comprehensive curriculum, and it covers issues around nutrition, physical activity, body image, self-esteem and goal setting, puberty and personal care, violence prevention, healthy relationships and consent, menstruation, and then for girls 12 and older, reproductive health. And so we've been doing this work now for about 10 years. We actually just had our 10-year anniversary, which is very exciting. And it's been incredible. So we distribute pre and post surveys before the start of our workshops and after the end of our workshops to assess, the girls' baseline knowledge, attitudes, and behavior, and see what difference our programs are making. And so what we're finding is that after the workshops, between 85 and 90% of the girls are reporting feeling more comfortable talking to their parents about the curriculum content. 95% of the girls are reporting feeling more confident that they have positive qualities outside of just how they look. Between 95 and 99% of the girls are correctly answering fact-based questions about puberty, menstruation, safer sex, and really importantly, are reporting feeling more comfortable talking to friends, romantic partners, sexual partners about consent, what's important to them, what is consent, what all requires consent. And so these are just some of the empirical data that we've collected, but we also have some incredible anecdotal stories as well. And so one story that I always love to tell, this was actually at a community center in Washington, D.C. at FBR, the ARC, the Boys and Girls Club there. And, there had been a group of boys at this community center bullying a group of girls because they had had their periods. And the girls who had participated in our workshops were actually able to step in and educate the boys and explain, look, if we didn't have our periods, you wouldn't be here. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I love it.
And so, yeah, exactly. So that just goes to show that, we're impacting not only girls and young women themselves, but they're actually taking what they're learning and sharing it with their families, their friends, their communities, their classmates, and thereby contributing to healthier communities. So, through all of the work that we're doing, we're not only, having an impact on health outcomes, but we're also improving girls' self-esteem, giving them the tools to advocate for themselves. And through all of this, the hope is that we're, giving girls the tools to change the social and cultural norms that are perpetuating gender inequality.
So I just want to know, how did this all start? How did you get involved in such advocacy work? And because you're not in DC, and so I'm just curious, how did it become based in DC, but you're in New York? And I mean, not to say that I don't think you should be based in DC. I'm not saying
right.
That, but I'm just and 10 years, Pavita, you're only 20. When did you just wake up one day and was like, and I'm joking with that, but you woke up one day and let me just start this amazing nonprofit.
Hold on, wait a second. Hold on, wait. You're only 20?
No, I'm just
I was like, what was that, prodigy? Why are we talking about that? All right, sorry, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
So I'm 32, and good question. So,
when you were 22, you want to know what I was doing at 22?
She's 32. She's 32.
But she started the nonprofit at 22 years old.
Yeah, my life feels like a failure.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Dude, you don't even know what I was doing at 22. You don't need to know. It wasn't.
I want to be you when I grow up. Go ahead.
Exactly.
Carry on.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I am part of the founding team of the nonprofit. So our main founder, Sarah Hillware, she was based in DC at the time. And actually at the time, so I was just finishing my master's at Yale, and then I moved to DC after my master's to live with my sister, who was beginning law school at the time. And, for those, that's a whole different conversation. Law school is a beast. But I was basically there to provide moral support when I didn't have much else going on in my life.
But no, other than finishing your master's at 22. I mean, you didn't have anything else going on. Okay. Overachiever, but it's all good. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
You're amazing.
Oh,
I just want you to know You're
If
absolutely
you leave,
freaking
if you leave
amazing.
this podcast with nothing else, know that we are in your headquarters. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yes. But
I
I didn't have
appreciate-
anything else to do but be my sister's cheerleader because I had just finished my master's at 22. You should be taking a break. Absolutely.
Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, no worries. So our founder is Sarah Hillware. She's an amazing woman as well. And she was based in DC, and she has lived in a lot of different places. But her I guess kind of motivation for starting Girls Health Ed was based on the research that she was doing at George Washington University as an undergrad. And, you know, she's also partially motivated by personal experiences when she was growing up with domestic violence and poverty. But her undergraduate thesis was looking at sex education in various contexts. So she was looking at the US, Kenya, India, and across the board, she found that there was a need for gender transformative health education. And at the time, what we were finding was that there were a lot of organizations that were covering, you know, issues around, let's say, sex education or HIV or nutrition, but there was nothing that was bringing all of these topics together in one space. And you know, anyone working in health and wellness knows that we can't isolate different aspects of health and wellness because they're all interconnected and play into each other. And so, so what was missing was a kind of comprehensive health education framework, but also one that was tailored to the unique needs of low-income girls and young women, and particularly girls and young women of color. And so at the time I was finishing my master's at Yale, and I was concentrating in social and behavioral studies. And I was working on my my graduate thesis, which was exploring cyberbullying behaviors in adolescent girls, but particularly a type of cyberbullying in which the victim and perpetrator are in a romantic relationship. So it was kind of cyberbullying meets intimate partner violence. And so I was looking at how involvement in this cyber intimate partner violence is associated with a number of mental health outcomes. So I looked at anxiety, depression, self-esteem, self-efficacy. And one of the most important things that I saw was that childhood trauma is actually a significant risk factor for later involvement in bullying and interpersonal violence, whether that be as a victim or a perpetrator. And this just speaks to the need for early intervention in childhood, teaching youth the skills to cope with whatever traumas are coming their way, but also to prevent that trauma from occurring in the first place, and giving them the tools to kind of break the cycle of generational trauma and violence. And so I happened to find Sarah on LinkedIn in my last semester at Yale. I reached out, I spoke about my passion for the mission and wanting to get involved in the initiative she was starting. And so we all kind of came together. There was a group of, I think, five of us, and you know, we worked on this curriculum together and started piloting it, and then we started giving workshops. And now, you know, here we are 10 years later in 5 different cities in the US and in Kenya. And you know, through my work, I've had opportunities to speak at various UN events and to advocate on Capitol Hill about the need for comprehensive sex education programs in schools. And so, yeah, it's been an incredible journey. In terms of what draws me to this line of work is that I'm also motivated by my personal experiences. So I struggle with anxiety and depression, as I know Shani knows very well, but you know, growing up, this was something that I always struggled with, and, you know, being an overachiever and more importantly, being surrounded by a lot of overachievers, it can be a great thing because it can be motivating, but then at the same time, it might give you the impression that it's not okay to not be okay, or that there's no such thing as good enough. And so I was subject to this growing up, and I was very lucky that my parents were incredibly supportive, and they always told me, you know, do your best. That's all we expect. So basically the pressure that I put on myself was all self-imposed. But, you know, it stayed with me. And then in my first week of college, I unfortunately had a very severe panic attack that resulted in my hospitalization. And from the, EMT officers who were handling my case up until the professionals at the hospital, supposedly one of the best mental health institutions in the world, there was a lot of stigma surrounding what I was going through. And so, you know, I was outright told things like, you're not being rational, or snap out of it, or, don't you realize how lucky you are? It's not like you have cancer or a broken leg. Why don't you let us deal with real problems? And now, granted, this was 15 years ago, but we've made a lot of progress since then, but we still have a long way to go in terms of how we talk about mental health and the social and cultural stigmas surrounding it. Now, I realized that I was very lucky. So, speaking of the overachieverness and graduating at 22, so I was actually only 17 when I started college, and that ended up working in my favor because I was still a minor when this happened, and therefore my parents were able to get involved and get me out of that situation a lot more quickly than if I had been an adult. And I was lucky again to have the support of my parents and friends and classmates and the resources at my university. But I realized that there are countless other people who are facing this stigma and who are in a much worse situation than I am, and who don't have the support that I'm so fortunate to have access to. And they don't even have the tools to talk about what they're going through. So in terms of my ethnic background, so I'm Indian ethnically, grew up in the States, but I'm Indian. And, we talk a lot about cultural stigma surrounding mental health, and it's very much alive and well in a lot of Indian cultural contexts. And so oftentimes my parents would tell me, don't talk about what you're going through with your grandparents or with these community members. And my response was bullshit. I have to talk about what I'm going through because sharing our stories is the only way that we can break the stigma and normalize the conversation around mental health, because far too many other kids, of my background who don't have supportive parents like I do are thinking that there's something wrong with them. And yeah, sharing our stories is empowering. Not only does it help us, on an individual level, on an intrapersonal level, but on an interpersonal level, again, helps change the conversation around mental health and all of these social and cultural norms that are perpetuating the stigma. So that is what got me into the work that I'm doing.
That's it. I thank you for sharing that piece, Pavita. And I'm wondering if you found, I know you can only speak from your own identity, but when you had that breakdown at 17, did you feel like there was not just a discrepancy or not just like some type of inequality, but because you were Indian, that you didn't get like the adequate or the empathy treatment that is shown and given to other ethnic groups?
That's a good question. So my experiences, at least when it comes to mental health, the stigma is universal across the board. So whether I had been white, Black, East Asian, or another race, I think the stigma would have occurred. I think another interesting piece is that Indians and Asians in this country are often viewed as a model minority, and we are seen as overachievers, and there are Indians and Asians who are doing incredible things, so with good reason. But I think the fact that I was Indian and presenting with these kind of symptoms and all of this anxiety about my academics, I think it might have been written off as, oh, it's just her parents putting all this pressure on her, or oh, it's just another Indian overachiever. It's not like she has real problems.
And what do you think needs to be so not to bring that, okay, I have always been saying that representation matters, right? Up until last week, right? And the reason why, so because I consider myself, I'm going to always be a relearner, right? I will learn something, and you know what? If I learn something better, I will unlearn that thing and relearn, right? And I heard an activist last week in the wake of the Tyree Nichols murder say that representation matters only if representation is the will of the people, right? And so I'm looking at this word representation, where I've been saying for years to myself and to clients, that's why we need this type of person at the table. That's why we need, right? We need a trans person at the table. We need a Black person at the table. We need representation matters at the will of the people. I'm trying to get to my question. I just lost it. But my question is, how do we make health, just not the mental health, but then the girls' health ed, that type of health, be accessible and culturally representative, so it becomes a norm?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question. And I think there are a lot of factors that come into play. So in regards to the girls' health ed curriculum specifically, this is a curriculum that we created, of course, based on our expertise as public health professionals, but it was also co-created with the girls and young women that we're serving. And so, because there's this whole mindset, it's almost like the colonial mindset, right? Like bringing something in because we know better, we're the experts, and we're here to impart this knowledge onto you who doesn't know better, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's absolutely not true. So the girls and young women whom we're targeting with our workshops, they are the experts of their experience. They're the experts of their own bodies. They're the experts of their family backgrounds, their circumstances. And I think that also becomes especially important when we're bringing our programs in an international context. So I mentioned that we have programs in Kenya as well. And so when we were bringing our programs to Kenya, we actually identified other nonprofit organizations on the ground in Kenya who could actually help us tailor our existing US program to the cultural context in Kenya. And even within Kenya, there are lots of cultural contexts. So when we were first starting our programs there, we were working in some of the remote villages where female genital mutilation is a huge issue, and girls being taken out of school for early marriage is a huge issue. And so we asked the girls, like, what do you want to get out of this curriculum? And across the board, these were things that they wanted to discuss. Like, how can we talk to our parents about wanting to stay in school and not just get married, but actually carry out our goals? Similarly, here in the US, when we were talking about menstruation, we talk about the use of both pads and tampons, whereas in Kenya, they don't really have the concept of tampons. And so, and also their access to like water sanitation and hygiene is going to be different from what we have here in the US. So making sure that you're seeing the communities that you're serving as experts in and of themselves and listening to them and understanding their context and making sure that you're appropriately tailoring interventions such that it's something that they're that's accessible to them and that they're agreeable to. I think that's one really important part of it. And then I think I also lost my train of thought, but I think along the lines of representation matters. So I also agree that representation matters. And I also agree that as long as representation is at the will of the people. But I feel like what's happening far too often these days, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, that I'm speaking based on my experience. I feel like there are far too many organizations that are, that are seeking out representation just for the sake of optics. But then when it comes to actually having—
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are we on board with that? We concur.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, tokenism. 100% it's tokenism.
It's alive and thriving, child. Like ain't nothing new. I say this all the time, and I will say it until people start to listen.
Yeah.
Ain't nothing new under the sun. And so yes, that is a big problem with representation.
Absolutely.
I love Sip Marshall. She's the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks. She came in, Black woman. She came in to fix the whole organization and she had to start from the top to the bottom because it was just a very toxic work environment. And she said that diversity is being asked to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're one of those kids that, I was the only Black kid in my school. I hated middle school dances. I didn't dance. Nobody asked me to dance with them, right? So when she said that, light bulb came on because I got asked to the party. You going to the middle school dance? Yes, I got invited. So now there's diversity, but being asked to dance, because when you dance with somebody got to lead.
Mm-hmm.
That's a leadership role. And we don't want to give up power in leadership.
Absolutely.
Ooh, that was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, quite frankly, I'll just say it. A lot of these DEI initiatives are falling short, and quite frankly are overrated, because we have the optics, but it seems like we're not truly inviting diversity of thought. And I feel like until we have that diversity of thought, then we haven't truly achieved what we're setting out to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Pavita, I knew you were smart, but wow, you're like amazing. Let's switch gears for a second. Well, I mean, Jesse, you have a question?
Well, I was thinking about, diversity thought, and obviously we are in a society right now where education about various topics, especially concerning girls' health and menstrual health, and is kind of a target right now. And I was wondering what your thoughts are concerning some of the recent stuff that's come out of Florida regarding, girls now have to submit their menstrual cycle in. Did you not know about this, Shani? Girls now in Florida, they have to submit their menstrual cycle information in order to participate in school sports. So it's not only like targeting young girls, it's also targeting trans and gender non-binary individuals, because they're basically policing who's participating, how they're participating, the sexual activity of everybody. I was just wondering what your thought and what your thought processes were on all of that stuff that's been coming out.
On a website.
I know. Yeah, no, trust me, it gets worse than this. So, of course, we all know what's going on in Florida. There are so many things that I can say about Florida. So, first of all, I think that that's absolutely disgusting. But I can also tell you an example that's worse. So, in New York City prisons, in order to get access to clean menstrual products, female inmates literally have to strip down in front of male guards and show their soiled underwear in order to prove that they need clean menstrual products.
Look, y'all didn't just schooled me at 11:24 on February 2nd. Like, what the actual
fuck?
Yeah.
Are you? And this is America.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like it's one of those things, like, can you imagine, Shawnee, you have 3 daughters.
Yes.
Somebody in their middle school, high school is coming up to them and saying, I need you to please show me that you have started your period. You have to tell me every single time you start your cycle.
What?
Yeah. Like, you have to submit that information.
So I don't know why. It's literally not rooted in any kind of science. For all of you girls who are just starting your period, know that actually I'm going to read, if you will indulge me. I mentioned that I have my second book coming out this year, and I'm going to give you all a sneak preview.
Okay.
So this poem is called Blood. 2/3 of girls around the world have no idea what's happening to them the first time they see blood between their legs. Why is it that they're never been taught, or that they've been given false information that makes them terrified to bleed each month? Like that they can't eat what they want, pray when they want, play whatever and with whomever they want. What's worse, they might miss days of school, turning their menstrual cycle into a vicious cycle of poverty and abuse. Girls, your blood does not make you weaker. In fact, it makes you stronger. There is power in your blood, as it is the source of all life. Tap into and embrace that power. And so you can actually see it in my original handwriting before it even got into the press. That's what I wrote. And so, yeah, girls who are just starting your cycle, girls who are years into ladies, non-binary people who are years into your cycle. There is power in your blood. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't play soccer, that you can't go to church, that you can't go to pray at the temple, that you can't be in the kitchen. It is all grade A bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I am appalled right now. And I just, both of these stories, I just don't, look, I don't even have words right now because I'm a processor, right? So I'm going to process this whole conversation and I'll probably be texting y'all be like, this is some bull.
Mm-hmm.
I just cannot fathom this.
Yeah, I mean, I was 10 years old. I was in 4th grade when I had my first cycle. And now, I mean, as an identifying transgender non-binary person, like, there's not like a shame in my cycle, but it's also one of those things that like, it feels disconnected from my body. And it felt disconnected from my body at 10 years old because I was the only one of my age group that I knew of, at least, being so young that started their cycle. And now, like, to think that there are other young people who are also starting their periods at 10 years old or however young they are, that are now being forced to like divulge that information when they don't even understand, really, like you were saying, like they don't understand what's going on in their bodies. There's nobody talking about it. And now their government wants them to submit that information into record to say, like, yes, I'm 10 years old and I started my period. Like, I can't even fathom having to do that when I was 10, and now to put that on young people today.
Yeah, I mean,
right,
I get this.
disgusting.
The government should now start asking people, okay, when do you go to the bathroom to take a shit?
or even boys, like, what's the first time that you've ever ejaculated?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that, if you're going to ask me about my menstrual cycle and what would eventually lead to reproduction, then I need to know exactly when boys start. Like, what was the first time you masturbated? Because I guarantee it was a lot earlier than when girls started their period.
Talk about it. This just doesn't feel democratic to me.
It's not.
Live in a democracy and have this, and I just don't understand how in 2023 we as a country can allow. I feel like this is so violent against women.
It
in
is.
so many ways, right? Like this is what it is also just does my mind just never understands how then also there will be a demographic of women that will vote against their self-interest. And I just don't understand. I don't understand how that could be acceptable to you as a woman to then say this is okay. This is okay because it's not like I am floored by this. Like I just don't. I need to figure out how do you stop this? Because here's the thing, and I want people to be very clear when I say this. I like. Turn the volume up. Stop. If you're washing dishes right now, stop and hear what I'm saying. I don't care if you live in New York or if you live in Tennessee or you live in Washington, D.C. or Maryland. If it starts in Florida, it's going to trickle to other states, right? And a lot of times we put our blinders on because we say, well, this is not happening in my neck of the woods, in my neighborhood, but it's going to come to your neighborhood. Yeah. And when we turn a blind eye from injustices that are happening, I mean, we just celebrated Martin Luther King's birthday. Everybody was quoting the quote. Like, it's one of his famous quotes, injustice.
The threat to justice anywhere, or anywhere.
It's a threat
Justice
to
anywhere is a
everywhere.
threat to justice everywhere.
Yeah.
There it is. We know the quote. I just mess up quotes, but we know the quote.
Yeah.
And so if you're not upset by this, that's the problem. Like if it doesn't bother you, that's the problem.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not gonna, I mean, it's one of those things too, where you look at it and you know, especially from an outsider's perspective, as a Black woman, as an Indian woman, as a non-binary person, that laws like this are for the sole purpose of shaming and regulating minoritized bodies. I want to know the sexual health and what you all are doing so that I can shame any person of color. And I want to make sure that trans and non-binary individuals are not brought to the table and included in the full capacity. This has nothing to do with whether or not somebody is on their period. It has everything to do with making sure that the people who are sitting in this table right here and the people who are like us are no longer allowed to be at the table. That's the fullness of what this is about.
Absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. I think we also need to recognize that when these things happen, there's always like, we got to go deeper. Right?
Mhm.
Because like you said, it's not about getting your cycle. It's not about that. It is about marginalizing a certain demographic and targeting a certain demographic. And I got to tell you, I mean, you know, I had this conversation a while ago with like what happens in prisons, and we got off the subject because it was becoming a little bit too combative. But, you know, just because people are in prison does not mean that their human rights should be violated.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, our current prison system isn't set up to be rehabilitative. It's set up to be punitive, which is not okay. Because if we're continuing to do what we're doing now to prisoners, to inmates, then as soon as they get out, they're at risk of perpetuating the same cycle, and they haven't learned anything. And in many cases, we don't even know if they were meant to be in prison in the first place, or if it was other factors that were at play. But I mean, this is very problematic. And the same with expulsions from schools, suspensions from schools. They're all set up to be punitive instead of rehabilitative and restorative. And so that's a problem.
yeah.
Does your organization, Pavita, do you work with like juvenile, I don't want to call it justice systems because they're not justice based really, but like juvenile detentions, because I mean you have these young women and young men who are being put in these situations, like you said, that are more punitive than reparative, and then you're throwing into situations where their education is essentially being cut off. Do you all do work with those kind of like spaces?
So that's a really good question. So as of now, Girls Health Ed hasn't gone into detention centers or those types of environments. But prior to Girls Health Ed, when I was in grad school, I did an internship in California, and I worked with a professor at Stanford University on developing a healthy living skills program for adolescent girls. We piloted it in a high school in California, at an all-girls high school in California, but we also started going into detention centers and working with the young juvenile. I don't know what even the proper terminology is. I don't want to say delinquents because that's also dehumanizing and stigmatizing. But the young ladies who happen to be in the detention center, and we did needs assessments with them. Kind of understood what their needs are, what they what they already know about sexual health, interpersonal relationships, with the purpose of trying to actually bring our programs into the juvenile detention centers. So as of yet, with Girls Health Ed, that is not a population that we've tapped into. And, we're also, like, unfortunately, we're right now a very limited resource organization, just like a lot of nonprofits are. And there are so many barriers to getting into that environment. So like in the context of my work in California, because I was working with a Stanford professor who had institutional review or approval to go into a detention center, that made it a lot easier to get into that space. But that is absolutely something that we would love to explore and an area that we would like to tap into.
Awesome.
So I did want to switch gears just a little bit because you brought up that book, your first published book. So I want to give you some time to talk about that, plug that. What made you want to write The Magic in Me, right?
Yeah, to all the magic in me. So again, this is largely based on my personal experiences with all the mental health issues that I've faced and my subsequent coping with them, but also just kind of as a tribute to the entire human spirit, because we're all humans and all have emotions. And so oftentimes we go through life, more often than not, we go through life trying to avoid negative emotions. And that's completely understandable. I'll be the first to admit that I even do that. But what we forget is that our negative emotions are half of what make us human. And to remove those from our life is essentially to remove half of our humanness and our rawness and our authenticity. And so, the message that I'm trying to get across in the book, and, we're surrounded by so many messages of good vibes only, positive vibes only, and well-intentioned as those messages might be, I actually find them quite harmful because they kind of send the message that it's not okay to not be okay. And so the premise behind this book is to actually invite those negative emotions and see what is it that they're trying to tell us, because they are playing a role at a certain point in our life, whether it be kind of a signal to get out of a certain situation or to make a situation better, or maybe there's just something that you need to learn from it. And so I just kind of reflected on personal life experiences where negative emotions were really at the forefront of my psyche. And I kind of had to reflect on, well, why is this the case? And what role is it trying to play? And so oftentimes those negative emotions are what allow us to take the next step to make our life better. And so the other thing that I want to get across is that emotions are very complex, and not every negative emotion is going to be 100% negative, and not every positive emotion is going to be 100% positive. There are positives within the negative and negatives within the positives. But if we can kind of learn to tap into and embrace that whole spectrum of emotions that we have and that make us human, I believe that's actually much more fruitful for our mental health than just trying to be happy and positive all the time. And that's what allows us to tap into our inner magic. And so To All the Magic in Me is a collection of love letters to all of life's emotions. So each poem is structured as a love letter to both positive emotions and negative emotions. And so it's I'm in a sense kind of humanizing the emotions or personifying them and having a conversation with them and just kind of reflecting on how they feel, what role they might play in our life, and the positives and negatives within all of those.
I love it. I love it. Go ahead.
You gave us a sneak preview of your new book. Would you mind reading maybe one of your favorite selections from All the Magic in Me?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll randomly open it up to a page and see what message the universe has for us today. Awesome. So, to Presence. Dear Presence, you and I have a difficult relationship. You try to befriend me, and I have trouble letting you in. But when we do spend time together, you keep me in the here and now, reminding me that the past is left behind and the future is yet to come. This moment here is really all we have. When I let you, you help me enjoy it to the fullest, encouraging me to take in the experience, using all of my senses, forcing me to appreciate that this moment too is fleeting. When my thoughts wander, as they often do, you are patient with me, bringing me back to the only thing that's true, which is this moment here and now, this moment that is a gift. Thank you for the present. Thank you, presence. Love me.
I love it.
Pause. Time to hear from our sponsors. The Embracing Race podcast is sponsored by the Gen Out Youth Chorus. Gen Out is an outreach ensemble of the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. Gen Out's mission is to give young LGBTQ plus and allied youth a voice to connect to the community. The ensemble is open to all singers between the ages of 13 and 18. For more information, contact www.gmcw.org. Isn't it our hope that we could come together as a society across the chasm of race and become the beloved community that Dr. King imagined? Interwoven Congregation's mission is to organize and support partnerships between faith communities with different racial compositions in order to foster racial justice and healing. For more information, visit interwovencongregations.org. HOD Records. It is not HOD, but it is HOD, no periods in between. HOD Records is a talent and artist development company that specializes in artistry development and content creation. Serving the DMV and beyond, HOD creates a family-centered management style that promotes a collaborative spirit. Check out HOD Records on all social media platforms and visit hodrecords.media for more information. Thank you all to our sponsors.
Yeah, I was talking about Reverend Dr. Monica Coleman, and and I've shared this quote, but your book title reminded me of the quote. And so the quote is, "Don't let anyone with no abracadabra steal your magic." Right. I think it's a curse word in there, but I can't remember where it. I think it's "Don't let anyone with no MFing abracadabra." And I took that to mean like no creativity, like, no, we're not doing that.
Yep.
I love it. I love it. All right. So we usually end. Thank you so much, Pavita, for coming on. Can you tell people how to get in contact with you if they want a book? I mean, I know your book is in the early editing stages. So you'll have to come back on to kind of promote that book when you go into pre-sales and all that. But where can they get in touch with you? How can they, if they are looking for some type of advocacy work? It's Black History Month, so I'm gonna be real bold and say we are, our listeners are a whole lot of liberal white people. They might want to donate to Girls Health Ed, and how can they do that?
Yeah. So to get in touch with me personally, I would say social media. So my Instagram is at Magic with Pavita. And then my website for purchasing my book is also magicwithpavita.com. And then for Girls Health Ed, our Instagram is at Girls Health Ed. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. And in terms of donating, you can donate on our website, girlshealthed.org. In the top right, there's a donate button, and that will bring you to the PayPal page, and you can donate there. Or if you have a very sizable donation, you can also send a check, and our address is listed on the website as well. But yeah, girlshealthed.org, Magic with Pavita. And thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we usually end our conversation with rapid fire. Jesse, you want to ask the questions?
Yeah. So it's whatever comes to your brain. Don't put a lot of thought into it. Just let it go. So there's 11 questions. So number one, what is your go-to beverage?
Riesling or Moscato or sparkly champagne.
Nice. What is your favorite streaming platform?
Netflix.
Cool. Spotify or Apple Music?
Neither.
Oh.
I use YouTube.
Nice.
I'm old school.
Nice. Apple or Android?
Apple.
Okay. Disney or Nickelodeon?
Disney.
Okay. Comedy, show, or concert?
Comedy show.
If you're gonna have leftover pizza, are you gonna eat it cold or are you gonna heat it up?
Heat it up.
Okay. What gives you hope?
Myself.
Nice.
Mhm.
Very good. Good answer. One word to describe how you feel right now.
Awesome.
Good. One goal for this year.
Selling lots and lots of copies of my book.
Yes. Speak it. What's one fun thing that we should know about you?
First, I have a nearly photographic memory. Second,
What?
I have traveled in 38 countries and 34 US states and territories.
That's awesome. That's very awesome. And your last question, and you can answer this as in depth as you want. What does love mean to you?
Love means connection and doing things from the heart and recognizing the shared connectedness amongst all of humanity and amongst and within ourselves as well.
Love it. Oh, Pavita, so glad that you joined us today.
Thank you. So good to see
Thank you.
The Embracing Race podcast, hosted by elders Shawnee McElwain and Jesse Littlejohn, tackles all topics from pop culture to faith and the intersectionality of white supremacy and racism. Nothing is off limits, as we hope to educate and transform with radical love. For more information, visit us at embracingrace.online or on Instagram at embracing_race_podcast. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you would like to submit a comment or question, please email embracingracepodcast@gmail.com.